G-man of old and more like a drunk guy on Facebook. In the spring of 2016, for example, Strzok exchanged a series of strikingly banal messages with his mistress about the presidential race. Quote, "OMG, Trump's an idiot," he said in one message. "America will get what the voting public deserves." A little weird coming from a public servant. Around the time of the Democratic convention, Strzok sent this message to his girlfriend, quote, "Congrats on a woman nominated for president in a major party, exclamation point. About damn time, exclamation point. Later, he enthused that Hillary should win the 2016 presidential race, quote, 100 million to 0. During the Republican convention, Strzok ridiculed the Trump family, messaging page in all caps, turn it on, 3 exclamation points. The douchebags are about to come out. You can tell by the excitable clapping. Keep in mind, this is the man the New York Times described as, quote, one of the most experienced and trusted FBI counterintelligence investigators. Other fawning accounts in the press painted him as a fusion of Sherlock Holmes, J. Edgar Hoover, and Batman. When you read his text, Peter Strzok sounds a lot like the 6th host of The View. That's not good news for Robert Mueller's investigation of Russia. The legitimacy of that investigation depends upon the public's faith that the people doing it are unbiased and capable of high-level thought. One man who potentially could restore some legitimacy to this investigation is the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein. Yet in testimony today before Congress, Rosenstein insisted that there's no problem at all. Everything is fine.
Expressed concern with certain aspects of certain things done by the FBI, but in general, throughout my experience working with FBI agents over the decades, I found them to be an exceptional group of public servants, very loyal, faithful, and dedicated, and I believe some of the finest people that I know.
Rosenstein went on to say he has total confidence in Robert Mueller.
It would be very difficult, Congressman, for anybody to find somebody better qualified for this job. Director Mueller has, throughout his lifetime, been a dedicated and respected and heroic public servant. He, after college, volunteered to serve as a Marine in Vietnam.
He's a Vietnam veteran? Okay, so is Roy Moore. That's an impressive resume point. Obviously, America thanks him for his service. But what does it have to do with the question? Nothing, of course. It's a non sequitur. Worse than that, it's misdirection. Nobody's attacking Mueller as a man or questioning whether he'll make it to heaven in the end. Instead, the question is, why did Mueller hire so many partisan Democrats to investigate a Republican president? 9 out of 15 are Clinton donors. At least one worked for Hillary personally. Was that a wise idea? Meanwhile, why did Mueller hide the reason for Peter Strzok's demotion for so many months? And why has he consistently stonewalled Congress's many attempts to exercise its constitutional oversight of what he's doing? To answer that last question, we're happy to have Congressman John Garamendi join us. He is from California, and he's a Democrat. Congressman, thanks for coming on.
Good to be with you, Tucker.
So I would think that you would share my interest and everyone's interest in seeing that this investigation is not only fair, but has the confidence of the public.
Exactly right.
Yeah, exactly right. So given that we now know that Peter Strzok was a seething partisan, does it bother you that he had a hand in so many key investigations in the last 2 years?
As near as I can determine, the current FBI director is also a partisan. He's a Republican. He's given a substantial amount of money to the Republican causes around. And so within the FBI, there are men and women who are Democrat and Republican. I would probably, and I think you might agree with this, that the majority of the FBI team, agents and others, tend to be conservative and tend to be on the Republican side.
That tends to be true.
Yes,
that tends to be true.
Yes.
And yet Robert Mueller himself was so concerned by Strzok's partisanship that he pulled him off the investigation.
As soon as he found out.
Down to HR.
As soon as he found out.
As soon as he found out, apparently, we're not exactly sure because he won't answer basic questions from Congress about this. He hid for months from Congress the existence of these texts. He won't answer questions like, what else did Strzok do? What else do we know about Strzok? Does it bother you as a member of Congress that the FBI is stonewalling your body's efforts to get answers?
Not at all. There is a criminal investigation underway. There is an investigation of national security of extreme importance to this nation, to the future democracy and the way in which we run our elections. And we ought not be in any way slowing down, harming, or stopping, or rather, in one way or another, causing that investigation to not go forward. It is about our democracy, and it is about a foreign government involvement in the democracy. What it has to do with the president is just one piece of it.
It's one piece, but here's one piece that we think we know, that the FBI apparently used this now famous Steele dossier.
Yes.
In order to inform its investigation,
yes.
and it perhaps may have paid for that dossier. Now, that's something that already happened. You're not going to be affecting the investigation by getting an answer to that question. The FBI will not answer the question, did they pay for that dossier? To what extent did they use it? It's been discredited, as you know. Why doesn't your body have the right to know that? I'm confused.
Well, whether they did or did not, the question begins with what is the dossier? The dossier has been a template for the investigations. It turns out that much of that dossier has already proven to be accurate and correct. It was important enough that the entire intelligence community looking at it informed the president that it existed, so that the president would know that these issues are out there and that they were being...
Where'd that information come from, the information you just described as important and central to this investigation? Do you know where it came from? It came from Russian intelligence in part. Does that bother you?
You mean the information
in the dossier that you just said informed the investigation? So the claim is Russian intelligence influenced our election. You just said that the dossier, provided in part by Russian intelligence, influenced this investigation. Why wouldn't that bother me as a citizen?
Apparently, we do not yet know where all of that information came from, but we know that it came from an individual who was involved in the British intelligence services, was years, perhaps 3 decades,
Steele,
3 decades working on the Russian portfolio. So he knew what was going on. He had his contacts, some of whom were willing to talk to him, apparently Russians and others. So he put together the dossier. The dossier becomes an extremely important part of what has happened. It is informative.
But you don't see this as a problem? Wait, hold on. Your concern, which I think is a fair concern, is that a foreign government may have influenced our election.
Well, we do know, at least by the intelligence agencies, that they did.
Okay, but we know that that dossier came in part from a foreign intelligence service, and the U.S. government may have paid for part of it. So why isn't that vital information? Why wouldn't you be calling the FBI today and say, what? You paid money for information from Russian intelligence?
No.
Tell us.
No. The information came from Mr. Steele, a retired British intelligence agency.
And where do you think he got it?
He got it from a variety of sources, some of whom were undoubtedly Russians, either in Russia or maybe.
And that information provided by the Putin government influenced a U.S. investigation into a sitting president. So you just described...
I think you are way out on a limb here.
No, I'm not at all. These are publicly available facts. You're saying that that's okay, that information from Russian intelligence is influencing an investigation of the president? That seems like a big deal.
Back up a bit. We know from our intelligence agencies, who undoubtedly got information from their sources in Russia and other places, that the Russian government attempted to, and in fact did, engage in influencing the American presidential election. We also know from our intelligence agencies, who undoubtedly got information from Russians somewhere in the government or whatever their sources may be, that not only did they attempt to influence the presidential election, they attempted to hack into our electoral process.
But
that's where
by your own description, Russian intelligence is influencing a federal investigation into the president.
Oh, you are way out on a limb.
I am not out on a limb at all. No, I'm not. We know that some of that information in the dossier came from Russian intelligence. You said the dossier was a basis of this investigation.
No, I said it was an element in the basis.
It was a basis of it.
It informed.
So, look, here's one thing we can agree on. The FBI should settle this for us. Did they pay money for that dossier? What was the extent of their contacts with Mr. Steele? Where did the information come from? Congress can't get answers to this. Why?
It may be interesting, but so what? So
because it would show that a foreign government is influencing a federal investigation into election officials.
Back up.
Seems like kind of a big deal, no?
No, it's not necessarily a foreign government. What we're talking about is that the information in the dossier and the information collected by all of our intelligence agencies, some of that information undoubtedly came from sources in Russia. We do know this. We do know that from all of that gathering of information, the dossier being but one piece of it, perhaps even a small piece of it, we do know that the Russian government at the highest levels attempted and, in fact, did
we know, because our Congress, which is supposed to be providing oversight of these agencies and of this process, is content to sit back and take the word of federal bureaucrats. I don't understand why.
Well, you saw these hearings. They've been going on for the last...
You guys could compel them to answer your questions. You could shut them down, and you should. I mean, how would... they're basically saying, we're not answering your questions, and you put up with that?
You are dealing with a fly on a dog's back here. What you need to do is to take a look at the overarching issue involved here. There are things we know. All of our intelligence agencies said Russia involved itself in the American election. Our intelligence agency said that Russia hacked our electoral system unsuccessfully, at least as far as we know.
They're hacking our investigation. I just want more information, and I think we can both agree.
We all want information.
Good. Congressman, thank you. Good to see you.
My pleasure.
There are plenty of other tough exchanges during that testimony on Capitol Hill. Mr. Rosenstein, here's a selection.
Do you have any opinion on the lack of the fruit from the poisonous tree that might have been erased by Peter Strzok?
Well, as a legal matter, Congressman, I can tell you that if evidence is tainted, then that would raise a concern for me. But typically, our cases would be prosecuted based upon witnesses and documents and not upon the agent, unless the agent personally were a witness in the case. But that would certainly concern us if there were any tainted evidence in the case.
Jonathan Turley, a professor at George Washington University Law School, and he joins us tonight. Professor, what was your take on those exchanges today?
Well, we didn't learn a whole lot, did we?
No, we didn't.
You know, the problem is that many of these questions really don't go to witnesses. They don't go to sensitive investigatory issues. They go to the role of prosecutors. So I don't understand why some of those questions couldn't be answered. I think what we have is we have allegations on both sides of the political aisle, both involving foreign influence, both involving questions of political corruption or influence on the Department of Justice. And it seems that we're in agreement. All those are bad things. So the question is, how do we respond? And I think that it would be nice if both parties would say, all right, fine. There are so many questions here. Let's have an independent and full investigation on both sides. Let's investigate it all. Let's be transparent. Let it be independent. I think Congress can investigate the DOJ allegations, but we do need a commitment on both sides to say, at the end of the day, the American people have a right to hear it all. And we didn't get that today.
And we have an obligation, I think, to preserve some public trust that our system isn't corrupt. And that, I think, is the point of the independent counsel, right? To take it out of the Department of Justice a little bit anyway, so there's no political interference. Given that, why in the world would the FBI apparently, and the investigation, hide these texts from Strzok, hide the news from the Congress for months that he was demoted? What would be the point of that?
Well, I find that perhaps the most troubling aspect of this. There's no reason for this information to have been withheld. And I think it's an example of how agencies thumb their noses at Congress, because Congress doesn't enforce its contempt authority. Those people should have been held in contempt. Congress has a right to this information. It's our government. And these are very serious allegations. You know, when you talk about someone involved in this core investigation, we're spending millions. But more importantly, we all have a lot at stake here. And if there are people there who are partisan, who are biased, we have a right to know about it.
Well, in this case, Mueller, it looks like, did the right thing. So it turns out he has this guy, very high-level FBI official, Strzok, who stepped outside the lines pretty dramatically, and he demoted him and sent him down to the HR department. Why would he be uncomfortable telling Congress of that? It does shake your faith. It suggests there's something else going on.
I think that's exactly right. I think that they fueled a lot of this narrative, a lot of these concerns. The only way to sanitize this is with exposure to sunlight, and they are resisting the disclosures that they need to have been made. Some of these texts are deeply disturbing. Some of it's just stupid. You know, having major justice officials go to the campaign party of one of the two major candidates is just stupid.
Well, it's especially weird. I mean, the congressman you just talked to, I thought, made a fair point, which is a lot of these people have political opinions, and that's right. Okay. It doesn't mean they can't do their jobs right. But if you're an independent counsel and you're under intense public scrutiny and you hire 9 out of 15 investigators who are donors to the other candidate in the last election, one of whom worked for... you're a law professor here in Washington. Is it impossible to find competent investigators who didn't just donate to the other team's political campaign?
Look, you can walk out in any corner in D.C., throw a stick, and hit 20 competent lawyers. You could hit 100 more that are not competent, but you can hit a lot of competent ones. There's no need to come up with a list that can be challenged. Mueller began this with the criticism of some of us. I thought Mueller's appointment was a mistake. I think he's going to do a fair job. I think he's going to, at the end, he's the special counsel is going to say that. But his connection to Comey, and more importantly, his interviewing for Comey's job, it really baffled me that he'd be even be on the list. You would think that after that start, he would sanitize this team, which he obviously didn't.
You think so? Because public faith is at stake here.
I think it is.
Thank you, Professor. Good to see you.
Thank you.
More evidence of flubs, failures, foul play keep piling up at the FBI, as we said, shaking the public's faith. The agency does not believe it should submit to oversight of Congress or anybody else. Why is that? We'll investigate next. The many partisan Democrats working on Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation, apparently the majority of investigators, they're not the only cause for concern over at the FBI right now. Reportedly, the Bureau has acted with outright contempt for Congress, the elected body it's supposed to be subordinate to constitutionally. The FBI won't tell Congress how much it relied on the Trump dossier, for example, or whether they paid for any of it. Looks like they may have. It also took a leak to get Peter Strzok's text messages, which we now have. We can now report tonight that the FBI forced a government watchdog agency to sign a non-disclosure agreement so that it would not share information about Hillary Clinton's emails with Congress. So the FBI isn't just ignoring Congress, it's actively sabotaging them and their oversight, which doesn't seem to be allowed in a normal government. Kim Strassel, a columnist at the Wall Street Journal, has written a lot about this and joins us tonight. So Kim, to the last point first, is that how can the FBI force a government agency to sign an NDA preventing Congress from seeing the information? I mean, is that even legal?
So as far as I know from my reporting, that has never happened before. And Congress was so unhappy about this, it sounds as though the OSC will never agree to do so again, but it's absolutely unprecedented. And what it means now is that very vital information that Congress is seeking, namely, in this case, some of the transcripts of interviews that were done with some of Jim Comey's closest associates, cannot be turned over to Congress because the FBI is forbidding the Office of Special Counsel from doing so, and they have ultimate say, which is an astonishing thing.
So what's at stake here, among other things, is social rest. I mean, the whole country has to believe that the system isn't corrupt and that when some kind of verdict, in effect, comes down, we can all accept it, like it or not. The Office of Special Counsel and the FBI are making it very hard to have faith in them. Why are they doing this?
Well, one thing I want to be clear about is this particular Office of Special Counsel is the government body set up to investigate Hatch Act violations, and that is separate from Mueller's body. So that's just important for everybody to understand that. But you're right. There can be no faith right now when you see these text messages that come out, when you hear the news that one of the senior department prosecutors, his wife worked for Fusion GPS, that he was meeting with them off the grid, that one of Mueller's team members was sending obsequious emails to Sally Yates, an Obama holdover. There can be no faith. The whole reason, and I think Trey Gowdy made this point today in the hearing with Rod Rosenstein, he said the reason we have a special counsel is because the statute says that you need one when there's too big of a conflict of interest. It's to restore the public faith.
Exactly.
But the conflicts in this case are now bigger than the ones dealing with the Trump-Russia collusion investigation.
You're going to have massive social problems if people think the system is rigged. I mean, of course. So you had a suggestion for how Congress could force the FBI to do what it's constitutionally required to do, which is disclose information in the process of being overseen by the Congress. How should Congress go about that? How should they make the FBI give up this information?
Look, the White House is going to have to step in here, and there's no reason why it shouldn't. This does not require President Trump to meddle in any way with the investigation, but what it does require is the White House, whether it be the chief counsel or the president himself, needs to order the FBI either to hand over this information and cooperate with Congress, or maybe even appoint a special employee at the Department of Justice whose only job is to ensure cooperation with Congress, because you're not going to get it from the Department of Justice or FBI. They're the fox guarding the hen house, because they're the ones with, as we saw from these texts today, with potentially damaging things to hide.
It seems the whole thing seems out of control. Kim Streisel, thank you for your reporting on this and for coming on tonight. Police in Las Vegas continue to try and block information in their investigation on the shooting that took place October 1st. Why are they doing that? And what could they be hiding? That's next.
Feeling at Wayfair.com.
Got another update tonight on the investigation into the Mandalay Bay shooting from October 1st. Las Vegas police have announced that they are seeking to keep 14 search warrants pertaining to the shooting sealed. News media are trying to have them published. It's unclear exactly why the authorities want to keep those warrants hidden. At least officially, there are no living defendants being investigated in that case, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. We'll continue to stay on the story, and we plan to update it for you on Friday of this week, if not before. So if you're watching TV last night, you know the Republican Party suffered an embarrassing setback in the state of Alabama. Democrat Doug Jones defeated the Republican candidate Roy Moore in the special Senate election to replace Jeff Sessions. The loss means that Alabama, which the president won by 28 points last year, will have a Democratic senator till at least 2020. Are there lessons from this that we ought to be learning? Tammy Bruce is a radio host and our friend, and she joins us tonight. Hey, so Tammy, you watched the election as carefully as anybody. What did you take away from it?
Well, I took away from it, first of all, that I won't miss Roy Moore, so I'm kind of glad that that's over. At the same time, look, people are saying, oh, it was a shocker. Oh, this is a sea change. This is an amazing event. It wasn't a shocker. I mean, we saw even with Roy Moore's previous elections, they were kind of close. So he's one Republican who didn't have major success in a lot of ways like President Trump did in his elections. But what we saw here, of course, and I think the biggest issue that we experienced was the lack of a unified GOP, right?
Yes.
You had a horrible, frankly, a horrible candidate, kind of the end result of the beginning of what Mitch McConnell did at the start. A lot of people talk about Mo Brooks. You've been hearing him brought up on occasion. Yes. And that was, you know, a candidate that would have really been good for President Trump. And yet I think it was Mitch McConnell felt that Luther Strange would be more answerable to him. So that's when Mitch McConnell first intervened and interfered. The end result, of course, as we know, was the election last night. So I think that ultimately everyone who's saying, the Democrats are saying, oh, this is a huge thing, it really isn't.
Wait, just to be clear on what you're saying. So you're saying that it was meddling by Republican leaders in Washington.
Right.
That caused the chain of events that got us running.
It still would have been very, very close. But when you're looking at Shelby saying, oh, I'm going to write people in, you know, giving people permission, like it won't necessarily, I'm not telling you to vote for Doug Jones, but in fact, I tweeted that, in fact, if you write someone in, you are effectively voting for Doug Jones. And here's the difference. I think that it reminded me of the Scott Brown win in 2010. That also was supposed to be a sea change. He wins the Ted Kennedy seat in deep blue Massachusetts. Right. Well, you know, hello, Senator Elizabeth Warren, just a couple years later, and Mr. Brown is now the ambassador to New Zealand. This is similar. Doug Jones will be a senator for about 2.5 years. Alabama will then elect a Republican for that seat. But what the Republicans and what the president must learn here is that the establishment interfered from the beginning, separate from the election last night.
Right.
And that caused, of course, a typical Republican debacle. And this is the lesson for the president to intervene here. It's not a sea change. I think the Democrats will make a huge mistake thinking that this can be applied to other races because it was a very unique dynamic. It was a local experience. Yeah. And in the meantime, it also won't have any long-term impact on what the Republicans need to do. But we need to look at the midterms, and I think they now have a better chance of expanding their majority in the fall if the Republican establishment wants the majority. I'm not so sure at this point that they do. I
agree with that. Actually, I'm not sure they do either.
Yeah.
Tammy Bruce, thank you. Good to see you tonight.
Thanks, Tucker.
Well, a student at Harvard University, he evaluated the attractiveness of the opposite sex. That's now banned. We've got details coming up. In a recent piece for the Harvard Crimson, which is a school newspaper but considers itself so much more, graduate student Daniel Hanrahan reproached himself for what is now a sinister crime. He discussed the attractiveness of the opposite sex. Hanrahan says he was out drinking during the orientation for his class last year when his fellow students raised the matter of which girls in their class were, quote, the hottest. With horror, Hanrahan says he failed to object, to declare that calling women pretty is a form of objectification that could lead to assault. Instead, he says, and I'm quoting, "I uncrossed my arms, and yes, I discussed which girls were hot." Apparently, Cambridge is no better than a Boko Haram camp. Kathy Rue, founding publisher of Catalina Magazine, she joins us tonight. Kathy, you are our Sherpa, you're our Tenzing Norgay, our spirit guide into the brave new world of progressive America, into the cultural revolution that's taking place. I didn't know, so thank you for that. I didn't know that this was a crime now.
Well, I mean, it's objectifying women, so that's always been a crime, to objectify women, not seeing them as intelligent creatures, intelligent people that they are, but to see them at Harvard as just hot, I mean, that's not right. That's
how about if a woman is intelligent? Not all people are intelligent, by the way. Some are, some aren't. Same with men, right?
Right.
But is it okay to acknowledge that you find someone attractive, or is that, as Mr. Hanrahan suggests, a form of assault?
Well, he felt that it was wrong because they had a group of guys sitting around and they weren't talking about how intelligent and wonderful these women are. They were talking about their physical attributes and that they were ranking them on a scale of 1 to 10 according to how hot they were. And he felt it was wrong. He felt that he was objectifying women, and he felt that he was creating and helping a culture of rape, he said, on the campus of Harvard. So.
But they weren't raping people, were they? Weren't they just saying which girls they found attractive?
They have a high incidence of rape. They have a high incidence of objectifying women, and 30% of women graduate from Harvard saying that they're victims of sexual assault.
Right, but
so
okay.
it is a problem at Harvard. There is a problem.
I don't know where you got those stats, but I mean, in this specific case, these men weren't planning to go out and assault anybody. Weren't they just saying, like, I find this girl attractive? Do you?
Well, we don't know what these men did.
Right?
We don't know what they did, but we do know that men were behaving badly and are behaving badly at campuses around the country. And now we find out that at Harvard, these guys are speaking inappropriately about women, and that
saying which ones they find attractive. So is this a transferable crime? I mean, if a bunch of women are sitting around and they say, you know, I think that guy is kind of attractive, or I think he's hot, or whatever.
Women are not the ones. They're not the ones committing the rapes.
So they're allowed to say that.
Well, women aren't harming anyone. So sure, if women aren't harming anyone, that there is no problem that women do this. But if men are actually harming women, which we know they are, then yeah, that is a problem.
So because some men harm, because I'm just trying to get the standards here, as I always do when you come on, just trying to figure out the new rules.
All right,
America's, very different from what it was last week. So because some men harm women, no men are allowed to say they find any woman attractive, but because no women harm men, all women are allowed to say they find men attractive. Is that the rule?
It's very rare for men to be objectified and go through experiences like sexual assault. That's just a fact.
But am I right? Is that the rule? Look, the rest of us are looking on, especially those of us over 40, looking on in horror. We see the country changing. We have no idea who makes these rules.
It's changing for the better.
Maybe so, but changing, and change is hard. And whoever makes these rules, like, no one gets a heads up about what the new rules are. They just kind of appear, and then you're held to account on the basis of those rules. So I'm just trying to get from you an accounting of what the rules are so I don't break them.
Well, the rules are, society is dictating the rules right now, not the law, but society is dictating the rules, and society is saying that men can't get away with this kind of human behavior anymore.
Who's society? I mean, I'm just but who's in charge? Is there like a basement room somewhere where a bunch of like people who are somehow in charge writing these rules?
Women are speaking up. There's a movement going on. We have the Me Too, hashtag Me Too movement that's going on. So women are speaking up, and we're holding men to a higher standard. We're letting them know that they can't get away with this anymore.
You can't get away. But I wonder, okay, look, by the way, just to be totally clear, as always, I couldn't be more opposed to assaulting or hurting women. I have, 4 in my own house who I love more than anything.
I know.
So, of course.
It's not you.
But
it's not you.
Just want to... I wonder if you've thought this through. I mean, so if it's now a crime to think or say that a woman's attractive, do you feel like maybe you or women in general might lose something in a society where men were too afraid to say they thought you were attractive?
It's not right to objectify a woman. It's not right to see a woman only as an attractive human being. These guys at Harvard were not sitting around.
What if you say, I respect you in many ways, but I also find you attractive?
But that's not what this op-ed writer said. He said he felt wrong. He wanted to speak up, and instead he helped these guys treat these women like they were lesser.
Let me just drop all the pretense and ask you a totally honest question, man to woman.
What?
You have a little bit of contempt for this guy, don't you? Here he is. He didn't do anything wrong. He didn't assault anybody. He's filled with self-hatred because he said he thought a woman was attractive. You can't respect a man like that. I mean, let's be honest.
He didn't say that he found a woman attractive. He was sitting around drunk with a bunch of guys who we don't know what they did the next day, and they were saying that women were hot on a scale of 1 to 10.
Ooh,
so
women were hot. Whoa. All right.
We don't know what they did.
Yeah, call the police. Kathy, thank you.
Thank you.
So instructive. More key players in the rise of Facebook are admitting that their website is destroying this country. We're not exaggerating. They're admitting that now. Can we fix it? And what exactly are they saying? That's next. Facebook has made a handful of people massively wealthy, richer than almost anyone's ever been in human history. But now that they've made their billions, more and more of them are coming out and admitting that the company they created is destroying society. Literally, those are the words they use. Last month, former Facebook president Sean Parker admitted the site was designed from the very beginning to be addictive, just like cigarettes or any kind of prescription drugs, and then bragged that his wealth would let him live to the age of 160. Last August, early investor Roger McNamee called Facebook a threat to democracy. Now a former vice president of the site says, quote, Facebook is ripping apart the social fabric of how society works. Tom Kirsting is a psychotherapist. He's known this for years. He's the author of Disconnected, How to Reconnect Our Digitally Distracted Kids. He joins us tonight. Tom, the directness of some of these former Facebook employees is stunning, and this is one from the former VP. The short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops we've created are destroying how society works. No civil discourse, no cooperation, misinformation, mistruth. He goes on to say that this thing, Facebook, is, quote, destroying society. How should we take this?
Well, it's like a slow dopamine drip with every like that we get on Facebook. So as human beings, a lot of people don't understand the psychology of the human being and the cravings that take place inside of us from every thumbs up, every like, and every bit of attention that we get. So they know that they have lured people in. And I think, the latest gentleman that made the comments expressed that he feels guilty about it now. And
yes.
That's why I'm here with you to talk about this.
So, but if the people who created the product admit that it's harming people, destroying American society, and won't let their own kids use it, then my question is, what other consumer product in the world would remain unregulated?
That is
the people who created it admitted that.
It's unbelievable. Actually, the Silicon Valley executives, there's a school called the Waldorf School out in Silicon Valley, and they don't allow any technology in the school. It's all paper and pencil. And 75% of the students enrolled in that school are the sons and daughters of Silicon Valley tech execs. So they know a lot that we don't know. And that's a very good question. Unregulated, like any other product or service that we know is affecting people, what are we going to do about it? And I think we're going to see some legislation or something come about in the very near future.
Well, the closest thing I can think of to Facebook are slot machines or video gaming, which clearly overpowers people's defenses and creates addicts out of a lot of people and drains their bank accounts and destroys lives. And that's why it's so heavily regulated. Why wouldn't we do the same thing with this kind of social media?
Well, I think we have to. I think we're going to start seeing that. I mean, when you talk about video games as an example, I mean, I deal as a therapist and as the author of this book, I deal with kids on a daily basis, and these kids get sucked into this, kids that may be remotely quiet, and now they can lead armies to victories and so forth. And it's very artificial. It's not real. That's the real problem here. Reality is what you and I are doing right now, having a conversation.
Well, you're the expert on the effects on the human brain. I live in Washington, so I can tell you the answer to the question, which is they have a massive lobbying budget, and that's why it's not regulated.
That would be correct.
Yeah, it is. Tom, thank you.
Thank you very much, Tucker.
Well, a Canadian broadcaster was just fired from his job for an unforgivable sin. He came on this show, and they canned him. He'll join us next to explain what happened.
Attention men with frequent urges to urinate. Super Beta Prostate has ingredients clinically tested to help reduce urges to urinate and waking at night to urinate. That's why it's the #1 best-selling prostate supplement in America. Don't wait. Try non-prescription Super Beta Prostate.
If you guys paid Christopher Steele at the same time the Democrats in the Clinton campaign were paying, or if you took the dossier, dressed it all up, took it to the FISA court, and used that as the basis to get warrants, this is unbelievable. And I'm here to tell you, Mr. Rosenstein, I think the public trust in this whole thing is gone.
That was Republican Congressman Jim Jordan on the House Judiciary Committee earlier today, and he joins us now. Congressman, good to have you with us tonight. It was quite interesting in there today. You know, in terms of what you were getting at with that particular question, you want to know if the FBI had any financial connection to Fusion GPS. I think the American people wonder why we can't get an answer to that question.
Right. We know who Christopher Steele is. We know where he's from. We know that he was paid by Fusion. We know he wrote the dossier. We know he met with the FBI. We know he met with Bruce Orr, a top official at the Justice Department. Did you pay him? How's that jeopardizing security of the country? We just want to know, did you pay him at the same time the Clinton campaign was paying him
but
to
let me
put
ask you
together
this.
the document?
But, you know, the storyline has been that they considered it. After the, you know, they say that early on there were anti-Trump forces that paid for that opposition research, and that they considered paying for it after that, but that they didn't. Do we know that that's not true?
We don't, but it's been reported they considered. It's been reported that he was reimbursed, whatever that means. That's payment. So I just want to know, those are the fundamental questions. Did you pay the guy who wrote the dossier, and then did you take the dossier, dress it all up, take it to the FISA court to get warrants to spy on people associated with President Trump's campaign? If the answer to yes, if the answer to those questions is yes, then this is a sad day for the country.
But you didn't get an answer to either one of those questions.
They won't answer, but those cut to the chase. And now I'm more convinced the answer is yes. Strzok sent to Lisa Page, where he says we can't take that chance. We can't take the chance.
Yeah, we have that. Let's put that up again.
We can't take the chance that they're going to elect Donald Trump. So he says we need an insurance policy. So here, this shows intent to take action to stop one nominee from being president. And this is from the guy who's deputy head of counterintelligence at the FBI. This is from the guy who ran the Clinton campaign, ran the Russian investigation, interviewed Clinton, interviewed Flynn. He's the guy who changed the exoneration letter from gross negligence to extreme carelessness. That guy is writing this text, and he's in a central position in the FBI. That's scary, which makes me think the answer to those two questions is, in fact, yes.
Yeah, I mean, and just to reiterate, he says, but I'm afraid that we can't take that chance, that risk, excuse me. I'm afraid we can't take that risk of him being elected. So how, in what forum will Peter Strzok be asked the question, sir, what did you mean by that?
He needs to be in front of the Judiciary Committee ASAP. First we need to bring him in and depose him. Then we need to put him in the same seat Rod Rosenstein sat today, and we need to ask him questions in front of God and everybody so the American people can see what this guy was up to. This guy who thought he was James Bond, this super agent guy at the FBI, he needs to be right there answering our questions. That's what needs to happen. And we've talked to Chairman Goodlatte about subpoenaing him, Andrew McCabe, Lisa Page, and Bruce Orr. All four of those people need to be subpoenaed and brought in front of the committee answering these questions that we're asking tonight.
Well, Andrew McCabe was supposed to come, and you're not sure when he's going to come. Do you think you're going to have any success getting any of them at that table in an open hearing?
They have to come at some point because we're the Judiciary Committee, the committee with primary jurisdiction over the Justice Department. This was a Justice Department matter. The FBI behaving in this way, the FBI taking a disproven dossier and dressing it all up and taking it to the FISA court.